Welcome to the latest edition of Martin Deeson Unloaded. Today's guest has had one of the coolest careers of anyone I've ever met. From dancing with the Pet Shop Boys in Japan to hosting The Word, which was, of course, one of the biggest TV shows of the 1990s. I've started thinking about it as the gateway drug to the 1990s. It was a precursor to so much. She's gone on to be a writer, a podcaster, a fragrance critic, and so much else. And she now fronts a tribute band. Now, you're thinking probably of something like Counterfeit Kylie or maybe Winehouse. This is not a tribute band like that. Other band members include Glen Matlock, the bassist from the Sex Pistols, and Kevin Armstrong, a big part, who's played guitar for everyone, including David Bowie and Iggy Pop. And it is an Iggy Pop tribute band called Lust for Life. And today's guest has the Iggy role in the band, which is a phenomenal thing we'll talk about. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Katie Puckrik.
Hello, Marty.
Hello. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
And like I say, you can call me Marty because you're American, and I like that.
Great. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Perfect. I just got to kick off by being honest and saying it is massively intimidating to interview someone who I consider one of the best interviewers I've ever seen in my life, probably alongside Michael Parkinson and David Letterman.
Wow.
I mean, hi, but I mean it. I think I've seen so many great interviews and back in the day that you did. Any tips for how I kind of get you to give me your nuggets?
Well, I'm so easy. I'm always open for business, so you don't have to work too hard to get me going. But the way I always approach interviews is kind of like a cross between being a diplomat and a prostitute. So you know,
run that by me.
You're kind of doing the massage for the best bits for the tenderloin, and that's the diplomat part. And then the prostitute is you're just bringing the spark. You're bringing the pleasure. So
nice.
it's just you're thinking about the tinkling ice in the cocktail glass and having a great time and making a little moment together.
Excellent. So I will remember that. So flattering and a little bit of fellatio.
Flattering and fellatio. There you go. The two Fs.
Okay.
Double F.
Excellent. Good. Well, let's start at the beginning because it's kind of the obvious thing to do. And I've been intrigued in my career. So many people I've met who've had very interesting lives, or interesting careers, seem to have grown up in a military background on bases and stuff like that. And you had, as far as I can gather, you grew up in Moscow, Berlin, Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Is there something about moving around a lot in the army that gives you the kind of like ta-da thing?
Yeah, it gives you ta-da 100%. Right. Because the thing is, you have to up sticks every 2 to 4 years, especially when you're a kid. That's pretty hard because you've established your terrain, what your gig is, who your friends are. And then you have to go to a whole new place, do the whole thing all over again. In high heels and backwards kind of thing. Yeah. So there I am living in the American Midwest as a 8-year-old, and then I end up in Moscow at the height of the Cold War when I'm 10. And what it does is it prepares you to kind of distill your personality down and to get your mission statement right out there, because you have to meet the new kids, make new friends, and kind of lay out what you're all about. And that's not too dissimilar to being a TV host and being a TV presenter. I suppose
it's not that different. And to being on stage, which is what happened to you very quickly, because I'm not sure exactly, but you moved to Britain in the 80s.
That's right.
And then, when I was kind of a student, and you immediately would dance, or you told me perhaps not immediately, but very quickly seemed to have been dancing with like the coolest kids at school.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like people I'd read about in the paper, Michael Clark, DV8, Pet Shop Boys, The Fall.
Yes. So I was trained as a classical dancer, and then had a whole monkey wrench thrown into the system when I was a teenager because I was diagnosed with a curved spine, scoliosis. And so the doctor said, not sure if you're going to be able to dance again. We've got to straighten out your back, and we're going to put this metal rod in your back. I was an inch taller, so that was a plus, but I wasn't quite as bendy. And I always maintain that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because what it did was it took me off the Swan Lake track. I definitely wouldn't have succeeded in that arena. And it put me into contemporary dance, performance dance mode. And that was my tribe. That was the people who were at the forefront of the avant-garde theater movement, who were making the coolest music. And of course, I was into everything that was happening, punk and post-punk and all of that. And there I was in Britain in the mid-'80s. And that is when the best performance art was happening. That's when Michael Clark was getting his contemporary dance company together, and he worked with the designers Body Map and with Leigh Bowery, who was a famous performance artist. And there I was on stage at Sadler's Wells with all of those people, and The Fall playing on stage. So it was one of those things that at the time, I wasn't being strategic. I wasn't thinking, well, I've got to, like open the Face magazine or ID magazine and see who's hip and happening. It's just that was the only game in town, and that's where I wanted to be.
Because that's what it is. It's a roll call of people from that era. If you were reading the Face or ID, they'd be the ones who'd be in there. I mean, it must have been. Was it intimidating, or was it part of the jazz hands things? Walk in and go, "Hi, Michael Clark. I'm amazing. Employ me."
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a showbiz chutzpah that happens as an American, but it's always intimidating. I was very impressed and excited by Michael, and so wanted him to think that I was worthy of being in his tribe. The other thing that I was doing at the time was maybe this is the only way you can do such a thing. I moved to Britain with the idea that I was going to be a pop star. And so...
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you how that happened. Right.
Yeah. So that was the other thing is that, I teamed up with a musician and we were doing kind of, I guess at the time, it was sort of a combination of soulful pop that was a little bit like Madonna meets Cyndi Lauper. Okay. And so I was doing a lot of live to backing tape performances all around dive bars and gay bars in London. So that was alongside all the music stuff that I was doing. And of course, this was before social media. And it was a case of, well, where's CBS located? Where's London Records located? And you get your little cassette demo tape together. And I'd put it together with a little pack of, little toys and photographs and headshots and march into the record companies and also Face and ID magazine. I'd walk in there and go, I need to be in your magazine. And they would go, okay, and put me in the magazine.
I mean, that's the thing. I think I'm always saying this, but I think the 1980s was kind of perhaps the last bit where the scene was, you could get them all in one reasonably sized room in London, right? The 90s kind of suddenly went, I think, Manchester and everything else started to get involved, and Edinburgh and the rest of the country, thank God.
I mean, the rest of all the regions, whether it was Sheffield or Manchester or Glasgow, I mean, it was all happening in the 80s in terms of fashion and music and all of that. But certainly it was... You had to have a little gumption to kind of get yourself in the room, and it was a matter of sniffing out the flyers. Like you had to get over to Kensington Market or Hyper. These were the fashion hubs that were in the middle of London, and so that's where all the other kids, the oddballs and the freaks would gather. And so that's where you went to kind of find out what was happening.
It was great before social media, wasn't it? It was just it was a lot more effort. A lot more time on buses late at night and getting there things would already have finished or whatever.
Yeah, well, there was that.
But a lot less easy, but it was just so rewarding when you got there,
It was rewarding. I meit was also scarier because you were blazing a path. You were, or maybe not blazing a path. I'm making it sound like so brave. But, it did take guts to look a little different. I had my hair was dyed this bright pillar box red, and I had this long fringe tease that went straight up. And of course, there was like 17 different colors on my eyes and bright orange lipstick and, neon bright colors and brothel creepers. That was always the look as well. And that was kind of modest because then you had other people who much more committed to the bit that were, your post-new romantics and the club kids that had the pasty white, clown white makeup and, way a lot of hairspray. And of course, Leigh Bowery that was doing the kind of sequin gimp look.
Just insane. I remember seeing Leigh in clubs. I never got to speak to him, but just this 9-foot tall apparition in a kind of breathing tube. Sort of
powerful,
like a
terrifying.
Fetish clown.
Yes.
Terrifying.
Yes.
I used to find. People would go across the room as Leigh Bowery, like, Jesus, you're not going to walk up and go, hi, Leigh, my name's Martin.
No, not at all.
But kudos to you because for every Katie Puckrik, there was 1,000 people who wanted to break through and make it. But I guess, was it one of the biggest breakthroughs? Because it's so impressive. You then went touring. Was it Japan with the Pet Shop Boys?
Yeah,
dancing?
all over the world.
Must have been incredible. Was it world tour?
Yeah, it was a world tour. It was their performance tour in 1991, and it was their first huge tour. There was a Derek Jarman directed smaller tour the year before, and the performance tour came out with the performance album, and that was directed by Metropolitan Opera director.
Wow.
And every single song had a different set, a different setup, different costumes, different wigs. There were 10 dancers, 3 backing singers. I tell you what, Neil and Chris, Pet Shop Boys, were so generous and so wonderful. Like there was no sense that we were kind of like just bundled in the back room. We were very much included, all of the, not just the talent, but also the wig makers, the makeup artists, all of it. So it was just an amazing circus. We started in Japan, went all over the world. And for 3 months, I was thinking there's no way in the world that this job is ever going to be surpassed. Because before then, of course, I was doing cool things that I liked doing. But to support myself, I was working as an office temp from Manpower. Right. So I thought, how am I going to go back into the office and type up, medical malpractice reports, which is what I was doing
after
before.
Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe.
Yes.
And that's always, it's that immersive world they were building then, right?
It was an immersive world. And then, imagine also walking out on stage in front of thousands and thousands of screaming fans. And also that was interesting for me because contrasting with my little one man and his dog pop routine, showing up in various dive bars around London. And suddenly I'm walking up on the big boys stage.
And were you like, therefore, I've got to make the proto-Madonna thing work? Or, oh my God, I can't compete with this?
Oh, no, I think it inspired me. I thought, okay, this is where we're going to go with this. And then there was a few amazing highlights from this tour. I do remember being at Radio City Music Hall in New York City and seeing Pet Shop Boys on the marquee. And as an American, that just seemed like, how come me, this sparky but schlubby kid is showing up here and deigning to step foot on the stage? And there was kind of a funny little moment where their buddy Liza Minnelli was in the audience.
But of course.
and Neil took me aside after the show, and or like a few days after the show, and he said, Liza had a note for you.
Holy shit.
That she was watching during Suburbia, one of the numbers, and she noticed, and there was a point in Suburbia where we're dressed as these kind of demented Stepford wife /nurses, and we kind of like lose our mind because we're in Suburbia. And there's a bit where I'm like, I go crazy, and underneath my nurse's uniform I start to take off a pair of big white knickers, these kind of granny pants. So I pull them off and I kind of twang them at Chris Lowe and swing them around my head. And so her note via Neil Tennant was that she was concerned that we could see up your dress, and, maybe you should have a second pair of knickers on, which I was thinking, I'm quite flattered that Liza Minnelli is looking up my skirt. I wonder what's up there of interest to her.
Of all the people to be slightly shocked by that, I would not put down Liza as that one. I wouldn't
put Liza down there, but I did appreciate that she was, speaking of jazz hands, she was looking out for a fellow theater rat.
That is literally attention to detail.
Yeah, it's attention to quite a detail. Quite a detail.
But listen, before I ask you about, obviously this is about to segue into the next big thing, which was a big 90s thing. Just before that, I've listened to a couple of interviews the last few days. I was really fascinated to hear your take on London in the 80s from the point of view, I think you described it as like still being in this post-war era. Is that because for us who were there, right, it seemed like it was the start of the modern era. Everyone was telling you it was. And the yuppies apparently were everywhere. They weren't in my squat in Hackney, I always say, but they were apparently everywhere. But I think you said something like you couldn't get a cocktail or a coffee coming from the States. What was it like to this little island?
It's really true that there was a quick flip into the future, but that quick flip didn't happen, I would say, until about 1993.
Yeah.
The 90s was really when, at least London, really turned around. But I moved here in 1984, and the last time I'd been in London was I was a child just kind of passing through on my way to Moscow, and that would have been 1970, 71. And it didn't seem to have been much change from 1971. So I still remember such things as air conditioning being advertised. So at a cinema, it would say
still is
air conditioning advertised, or we have ice cubes. I remember like that would be a thing outside like a restaurant or something, like we have ice. So that was interesting. And then there was I just remember certain things struck me, like you'd go to the supermarket and everything was so curious, like brown sauce, red sauce, white sauce. Like it was so generic. It was so like, I don't know, dollhouse food. And then there was this thing called orange squash. So you couldn't actually get fresh orange juice, but you could get orange squash, or you could get powdered milk or powdered eggs. So to me, it very much was like make, do, and mend. Well, I know we're not being bombed right at this minute, but if we go down to the bomb shelter, we can have a delicious bit of powdered milk and powdered egg. And if you have any water and maybe some ice, we could have orange squash.
So true, isn't it? As well, powdered custard, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was
lumpy custard. I mean, even now, though, I still embarrassed. You go into an English pub, not most of them have now changed, but still many will give you the drink, a gin and tonic. And you go, could I possibly get some ice in that as well?
Yeah,
like it's a ration substance.
I mean, you're just way too fancy for that. But then there's other. I mean, this was the era of bedsits as well. So I lived in a bedsitter, which for the uninitiated, you shared the loo, which was on the landing, with like maybe 3 other 1-room studio flats. And I remember there was like 50p that you would have to put in the electric or the gas meter. And people had like payphones in their house.
Yeah.
It was, So actually one of the first things I did when I got my first good job and I bought a flat, I thought, I'm getting a washer and dryer, and I'm getting a dryer because people didn't have dryers. No. That was the other thing.
Well, people, I mean, in Bedsit World, which is a Pet Shop Boys song, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, no, Bedsitter, that's a Soft Cell song.
Of course it is. Yeah, Soft Cell. People didn't have washing machines. You'd go to the laundrette. It was so much so that
laundrettes
this was like part of UK culture.
Yeah.
You'd go sit and you'd meet people. It was that was what dating apps were based on.
So of course I thought, like, I'm not putting the place down, although I kind of am. But I thought it was so exotic because everything was so difficult, and you had to like climb a lot of stairs all the time, and the subway, the tubes were kind of like dusty and dirty. But I mean, everything was. It was exciting. Because
I've always maintained that decades don't go in the 10-year bit they're meant to. For me, the 90s kind of started, like you said, kind of in about 93 or something.
Yeah.
Like that. But having said that, your thing kicked off the 90s because you were on the Word a bit before that, right? How did that transition happen? Where did you go to the Word?
Yeah, so the Word, as you alluded to, this was like the destination viewing on Channel 4. And it actually started in 1990, but my first year was 91.
Oh, okay.
So it ran for 5 seasons. I did the best seasons, the second and third. It was the most glamorous, and it was when it was kind of, before it kind of became more clickbaity and stooped to conquer. But this was the show that was destination viewing, post-pub on a Friday night, live. It would have the biggest Hollywood names. It would have the biggest, coolest bands. It would have outrageous stunts that were happening in studio, and then it had a lot of crazy live outside broadcasts. And
you did a lot of those.
I did a lot of the outside broadcasts.
Which is quite, it's a big job to be given. But I mean, a transition from, I want to be a singer and I'm a dancer. How did you get it? And how did you feel about them putting that so much faith in you? And it turned out to be justified.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I'm flashing back. You saying that is flashing me back to my first press interview that was set up for me when I got this big job, which was with Piers Morgan. And Piers was he was the showbiz
Bizarre
editor.
editor on The Sun?
Yeah.
Probably. Showbiz on the Mirror?
The Mirror, was that what it was? And he was very, I'll answer your other question in a minute, but it just reminds me of him. He was so charming. We were at Groucho. I'd never been there before. And he was kind of maneuvering. You could see him like trying to dig for dirt. So first he was trying to pit me against the other woman presenter on the show, Amanda de Cadenet.
Yeah.
Like, how did you find it? Like, cat fighting. And I was like, no, she was absolutely charming and invited me over to her house for lunch, made me scrambled eggs. We had a great time. And then he was sort of angling for, well, how did you get, what did you think when you got that job? And I said, well, they obviously picked the best person for the job. Nice. Like, what are they going to do? Shoot themselves in the foot and get the not best person for the job. And then he said, "Oh, you're a bit, big for your britches." And I said, "Well, I mean, what would a brain surgeon just say? I'm not very good at my job, and I don't know why they hired me." Like clearly. And then what he ended up going for when he wrote about the encounter was, I think I'd mentioned in passing something about, he said, how has fame, changed your life or affected you? Because I was famous, Marty, overnight.
Literally, right?
I was famous overnight because so many people watch the show. Like 50% of the 16 to 24-year-olds watch this show. So like I went into Marks and Spencer the next day and the girl at the till went, "Oh, it's Katie Puckrik. I saw you on TV last night." And I have a weird name, and she pronounced it correctly. So I had mentioned to Piers that I said, "Yeah, well, the thing is when I go into the laundrette, people are like, there's kind of a static in the air, like, ooh, it's her." So it's like kind of awkward. You kind of are feeling self-conscious doing your normal thing. So that was the headline is, the word too cheap to, pay Katie Puckrik enough money so that she doesn't have to go to the laundrette anymore. So he was kind of on my side.
Is that a controversy he could make out of it?
Yeah, it was kind of good.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know this show existed. It had been going for one season. I was touring the world with Dancing with Pet Shop Boys. And it was my best friend, Anne, who called me up when I got home back to London. And she said, "By the way, there's this TV show called The Word. They're advertising for a new presenter. No experience necessary. And I think that you would be good." So it was literally her vision to say, "Go for the show." And all right. So I just sort of edited together some funny little clips that I'd shot backstage on the Pet Shop Boys tour, where I was pretending to interview my friends on the show. And then I think I sent in some homemade DIY pop music clips that I'd made, like Super 8 videos. So it was all very homespun. And then I got the call to go in and audition. I think like 5,000 people applied for this.
That's what I was going to ask. I've read that, right?
Yeah. There's like thousands of people applied for it. And then I think they called in 200.
Wow.
And we were all just kind of mushed into their Isle of Dogs offices, and various producers were roaming around with camcorders just firing questions at people, and then they were putting us into groups and interacting, and I made it through that. And then there was a second callback with 20 people, and I think Davina McCall may have been in that group.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Jez Nelson, who went on to, he's a broadcaster and big jazz broadcaster and has a production company, and good people were in that group. And that was the one where I remember they threw us in a room with, like, one by one. I had to interview Take That, who were a new, young, like, gay band is how they were kind of advertised, like cute gay boys was the idea. That was how they were being sold. And so I was quite surprised that when I sat down in the middle of these gay boys that I was kind of like feeling hands everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, it was a little like, sitting down in a basket of puppies.
Seriously, not 90s hetero behavior.
Yes. And then made it through that whole batch, and then got the phone call from Charlie Parsons, who was the exec producer, that I got this job. And I was at home on my own in my little rental apartment and hung the phone up, and then thought, how do I celebrate? Got on the bus, ended up at Harrods, bought a 50p hair scrunchie in my Harrods bag. I mean, I was just so dissociated, just like, But it was the best. It was actually, the funny thing was I went in, I auditioned for it thinking, I don't know if this job is for me because I'm an artist. I sing, I dance, my body is my tool. And then the first night that I was, after we'd done a day shoot in Los Angeles, and the crew and I were driving in a open top Cadillac, convertible along Mulholland Highway, and I thought, you know what, this is actually a really good job for me.
This'll do. I love this.
This isn't bad.
And then you were quickly, it generated kind of mock outrage tabloid headlines, like whatever that be, Saturday morning, I suppose, right? Every week. But you were quickly involved in some of the most famous and memorable elements of it. I mean, the episodes from it. The Oliver Reed one is just what people always, I know, ask you about, but it's definitely worth referring to because that was so famous at the time that basically, to recap, Ollie Reed was in his high pomp of alcoholism at the time, had often turned up drunk on TV.
Yes.
And you were the one who had to deal with this, right? They put him in the
Yes.
dressing room with cameras, was that right?
Yeah, so just to recap, Oliver Reed, just a towering talent, just an amazing, brilliant actor, and enjoyed getting refreshed. And so he was already known for showing up, as you say, on the late night talk shows and being good value, as they always used to cynically say in the TV production meetings. Oh, he or she is good value if they're like losing their shit on television. And so the idea was to stage Ollie Reed putting him in harm's way, as it were. So putting the hidden cameras in his dressing room, stocking it with lots of booze. And then I was charged with just following the action and narrating it, and we're checking in on Ollie Cam and what's happening. And then the very talented actor Paul Kaye, who went on to perform as Dennis Pennis on the Sunday show, he was there to be this fussy, fidgety producer that would go in and like mess with Ollie and like check in a very officious way if everything was all right. So the idea was that we'd bring him out once Ollie was fully lathered, and then all hell would break loose. And this is often what would happen on The Word, was that they would devise something, hope for something horrible to happen, or exciting to happen, and it actually would always exceed expectations. But the thing that was interesting about this was so we had checked in with Ollie, and he was shirtless, taking off his leather jacket, big barrel chest and beer belly. And then he was sort of posing in the mirror and knocking back the vodka. But by the time we brought him out into this baying crowd, because of course we would have like 200, 300 people.
And they'd all been watching it on a link.
They're watching it, right? And they're all, the studio audience is out there, and they're probably quite refreshed as well. Yeah. And I bring him out. He was charming. So he had this way. It was ambiguous, Marty, because it wasn't clear if he was acting drunk or if he was really drunk, or he was really drunk, but he could still act charming. And so there's Terry Christian, the main host of the show, trying to take control and interview him. And he just shushed Terry, which I loved, and turned his full attention to me to intone some sort of very flowery theatrical thespian thing in my direction. And then he ended up singing Wild Thing, backed by the Lemonheads.
Yeah.
But when I think back on it, I mean, this really encapsulates what happened at The Word a lot of the time. So you had this very cynical setup that was dreamed up in the writer's room, in the production meeting at the beginning of the week. Okay, we're going to get these elements. It's going to all kick off. It's going to be fantastic. But then there would be unexpectedly heart. There would be heart and emotion that would happen. And oftentimes, I think it was because I was there, because I would feel empathy for somebody in that situation as a performer. Like, I know how exposed you are, and it's live television. And so and people would reflect back to me afterward, like, oh, I like how dry you were with somebody, and you were so obviously sarcastic and sardonic. I never actually was. I was actually more earnest. And of course, the 90s was a very kind of mean time. It was all about irony and being mean and detached, and I don't really care. And it wasn't cool to be earnest. So it was unusual. It was funny to me that my earnestness read as detachment. But that Ollie Reed thing was something that actually did have heart, because he came back. He sort of took back the night, as it were. And you couldn't really, I think he made the viewers feel a bit embarrassed to be voyeurs and to be part of this attempt to humiliate him. And he got on top of it, and he maintained his dignity.
I think I completely agree. I think you brought real warmth and humanity to it. I think, to your point about Ollie Reed, I'm sure it came across to me that a seasoned drinker, drunk himself, basically sober, or he's capable of being charming when drunk, because the man drinking a bottle of vodka is just like to him.
Yes, yes.
But I'm glad you mentioned Terry Christian as well, because one thing that really struck me then and now is I watched the thing the other night, which was brilliant in the sense that the BFI, the British Film Institute, interviewed you and Terry Christian about the show.
Yes, with Samira Ahmed was the interviewer.
Which brings me on to the legacy in a second, but also I was just overwhelmed to watch. You worked with Terry Christian, Mark Lamarr, some other big, when I say big male characters, I mean men who just can't shut up. Terry Christian is remarkable to watch in that show because I've got a lot of warmth for the guy. I'd love to have him on, but he just keeps talking in there about how, I'm just so shy because of my childhood, and because of my childhood this, because of my childhood that, and you are just sitting there waiting, like just your eyes are going, shut the fuck up and let me get a word in. Working with those characters then, when it was a more male world, perhaps than it is now, I wonder what that was like. These are narcissistic men, basically.
Well, I don't know. I couldn't diagnose Terry or Mark. I wouldn't want to do that. Terry does have DJ-itis. He's good at filling the air. He has a lot to say. The story I'll tell about Terry is that so when you say saying three things at once here. When you say working with these big characters, I actually never worked with them because we all had our domains of master of our own domains. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I would only encounter Terry on a Thursday night. The show went out on Friday, but Thursday night was when we'd meet at the office, have our production meeting, and then be in a cab for an hour going from Isle of Dogs in rush hour to Soho to record our voiceovers for the various video packages that we'd done. And so Terry was so he knows a lot. He has a lot. He's got a mind like a steel trap, and he's real smart, and he's really well read. And his favorite topics are history. The royal family is bad. World War II. The royal family are all related to Nazis, or anyway. So he's got lots of information about that. So I would it was like a TED Talk for an hour about the royal family being related to Nazis, and then his other topic was this is kind of Nazi adjacent, which was the TV producers were all like, Southern ballet dancing bastards, like
public school class
public
war
school.
thing. Yeah.
So it was all like, eat the rich, like his politics, it's all in the right place, but not a lot of curiosity about me or anything.
I was about to say, did he ask you anything about your week?
Oh, no, he did. He wanted to know, and you should get him on this show because he'll be totally good value, as they say. He wanted to assess if I was posh or not. So that was important. So he wanted to know, like, what was he needed to know, like, what my class level was, but he couldn't quite pigeonhole me because I'm an American. Yeah. So we liked each other. We still do. And he's a very singular character.
And seeing that BFI thing, which I thought I was so pleased to see them taking your show seriously at the British Film Institute, which is a serious thing. And it's not, I don't want to talk about Loaded much, but it's not an unparalleled situation that we both did things in the 90s.
Yeah.
I find it so strange still at times, but I've finally come to terms that I'm actually proud of it.
Yes,
as you should 30 be. Years later, they're still talking about a TV show and a magazine.
Yeah.
Which is not actually weird. It's actually that we both were involved in it. We were both part of a much larger thing on each case, but involved in something that really was
lucky for us
loved
that we were
and time-changing.
Yes, they were both
on.
Iconic shows, and there's no way. Maybe you knew, but on your project, but there's no way. Because as far as I was just on a roll. I was like, well, that was pretty good touring the world with Pet Shop Boys, and now I'm on this show where I get to talk to Tammy Wynette and Donna Summer and just incredible performers, and have these incredible performers just in the studio, private dancing kind of thing. So I was always proud of it, and especially like there was. The show got a little more down market as it went along because it was inventing itself as it went along, and then it became somewhat more formulaic. But when you look at everything that was encompassed within the word, whether it was outrageous stunts in the studio or unusual collabs between, Oliver Reed singing with Lemonheads, or doing hard-hitting stories about Scientology, or John Wayne Bobbitt, or of course they were always scurrilous. And
it's a Snoop with Rod Hull and Emu.
Well,
Is the
yeah,
one that always
yeah,
sticks
so-
in my mind.
yes,
And I've
yes.
seen you say that's so classically British, and it kind of is. It's like the Morecambe Wise
Yes, like a
Christmas
Morecambe
special.
and Wise. And
Yeah.
when you look back at all these things, or even the way that they promoted me getting selected for the word, they turned that into a half-hour documentary called Word Search that they showed maybe the week before the season I was in started. And so they kind of teased, like, is it going to be this lady or that man or this blah, 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 and surprise, it's me. And it was the big reveal. You know, you think about that nowadays, a search for the next, you know, top chef or, you know, whatever it is, that would have been a 10-part series
Would have been a season.
yeah, it would have been a whole season.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that the word, just for a throwaway item, or they would nowadays, that's a petri dish, you know, of all of these different ideas that they would have milked to infinity. And it was just a question of these incredibly talented producers who I'm still friends with to this day, who this was often their first job. And they all went on to, most of them, to kind of rule television and continue to make television and shape the television landscape. So it is something that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say it was like the gateway drug to the 90s.
It
was. Kind of
was.
like you say, better the Petri dish. And then moving on, just because of the pressure of time, you then went on, as far as I know, you created the show
Yeah.
Pyjama Party, which I'm
Yes.
kind of interested in because I must admit, I didn't see it much because I was busy
You know who
being
saw
it.
yeah, that's right. That's the thing is I was making the culture and not actually participating in the
Right.
culture in a lot of ways. Like I missed Acid House completely, and I missed
Too busy
raving.
being cool.
Yeah, well, no, I was too busy, like, you know, writing my
Yeah,
scripts and doing things. But the thing about Pyjama Party was that it was a reaction to the whole lad culture
Well,
movement.
this is what I was going to ask because
Yeah.
because I didn't like that thing at the time where so for starters, there were loads of women readers of Loaded. You know, there were people. They only happened later that it became this kind of toxic masculinity thing. But they were very soon branded as the ladettes, which always, even then, just seemed to me like, why are you being defined as like a slightly diminutive version?
Yes. So
and I think you didn't like that.
well,
like,
no, I'm going to blow your tiny little mind.
Blow it.
I coined that phrase. So I came up with ladette.
Shut the front door.
Shut the
Seriously?
front door. So, and I get what you mean about it seeming like I'm establishing this idea that women are the diminutive,
Yeah.
but it was really just more of a catch-all. It was actually when I was promoting Pyjama Party. It was when I was doing all the interviews for that. And my point was, look, we have this great movement for young men where the whole idea is like, just embrace your inner stupid, you know, just like you're going to do that shit anyway. So just do it and be out and proud. And the thing is, women should have that same freedom as well. So women, you know, are stupid. They're hilarious. You know, they just want to, you know, act the fool, and we are so funny and we are so fierce and we love being in a gang together just the way the boys do. So that was the whole idea. And Pyjama Party, and in fact the Girlie Show, which was ripped off of Pyjama
Right.
Party by Channel 4, and it was actually good because it just meant that we had our whole little like corner of you know, car dealerships all kind of selling the same thing, and that was all part of the movement. And it was really a blossoming of just embrace everything that you are. And the thing that was interesting, I do remember doing an interview with the Sunday Times about this, promoting Pyjama Party and talking about ladettes. And the sour-faced woman who interviewed me, she had this concern trolling element of like, oh, Katie seems so intelligent. And why, you know, she should be doing more. And the thing is like, oh, are you ever instructing Jonathan Ross or you know, any other male host that like, oh, don't be silly because, you know, you have to lift all men up at once. So it seems like there was so much pressure on a woman TV host to be.
Just to blow your mind.
Okay.
No, but I just recently, because I'm interviewing soon a guest who I won't go into, who has written a very good book about the 1990s. And I was interviewed to go in the book. And I I can't help swearing. I just do. He interviewed me. I was effing this and effing that. And I have been portrayed in this book as like this sort of foul-mouthed yob of the 90s. And there are other journalists talking afterwards going, thing I hated about the 90s. They don't actually say me by name, but it's put literally straight afterwards.
Right.
There was like, really intelligent people pretending to be really stupid in these lads mags. And that really bit me, annoyed me, because exactly, why can't we have fun? And not pretending to be stupid. You don't have to go around the whole time discussing Nostradamus or, the Magna Carta in ancient Greek. You know what I mean? Just do one.
It's try hard, isn't it? And I mean, read the room, people. That was the era that people loved your product, my product, and the word, the shine came off, got a little brown around the edges. Same with Loaded.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Same with the USA right now. I mean, like things wane and wax. So.
Liza, we're annoyingly short of time because there's just so much to talk about in your career, because I find it so interesting what you've done. We have to come on to Lust for Life in a minute, but just before, I can't pick which bit to go for, whether I go for your kind of ruling of the yacht rock world, which I find fascinating, or your perfume videos, which I didn't know about, I must admit, but I'm fascinated by them as well, because I wrote a feature once for Elle magazine about perfume, and since that day I've been kind of obsessed with it.
How about that?
There's so much more to it. But let's do the yacht rock. Why has that become a touchstone for you? And is it kind of like, without sounding too intelligent, like a Proustian Madeleine thing that takes you back to DC? And...
I have to 100%. You're Proust Jr., you're Proust Redux. I grew up, had my teen years, my coming of age years. In the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And of course, that was the height of this music that was coming out of the West Coast. And it was, I lived in Virginia at the time, but anyone with their ear next to their FM radio could have been transported to a marina 1,000 miles away. And it wasn't necessarily the music I sought out as a kid, but you just heard it pumping out of the older boys' muscle cars as they vroom vroom through the cul-de-sacs. And it was always this sense of well-being. Like you felt like, you know what, when I grow up, when I hit that adult world and I am adult enough to have a martini and think that it tastes good, this is the music that I'm going to listen to. It's kind of like aspirational. Everything's okay. I'm large and in charge, and life is effortless. It's that kind of thing. So my whole association with yacht rock happened some years ago when I pitched it to Radio 2 as a series of bank holiday specials. So that's what happened. And then that got me into, ended up doing a 2-part series for BBC 4. And then I ended up doing a box set, 2 album / 4 CD box set, which is called Katie Puckrik Presents a Yacht Rock Odyssey, available now.
Get it now.
Yeah, get it now. So that's just one of the many things. I like to call myself a savourer. I savor things. So whether it's music, whether it's perfume, I also write whiskey reviews. I love music. I love color. I love fashion. I love people. I'm curious about the world. I just like being alive, and I like to savor the flavor.
That really comes across, because I've got my scribbled notes here from the last few days or the last couple of weeks thinking about it. I've literally written here enthusiasm, challenge, interest, and bravery, and intensity. You seem like, to me, a pop psycho, a seeker after intensity, and you're enthusiastic about what you find. And I love it because it's a complete antidote to what you said, which I've always loathed, is that knocking culture, that kind of being ironic about everything, or just finding it much easier to go through life going, oh, do you see that? It was so... That's I always think I shouldn't speak ill of the dead. A.A. Gill, the restaurant reviewer, wonderful writer, but he would write hilarious reviews about how shit some soup was, and it's just like, James Brown, to his credit, always used to say it Loaded, if it's not good, don't write about it. If you don't like
I love
it,
that. I love
which is
that.
one of his great strengths. And I think that I love that about you.
Thank you.
But we're just like slightly over time, but that brings me to Lust for Life.
Yes.
Because A, I want to hear more about it from your mouth. It's just the most amazing project.
Yes.
And B, just hats off, because as far as I know, you sang at the start, but I've watched videos to get up on the stage with musicians who are some of the greatest musicians in the world, and to sing Iggy.
Yes.
That takes
I was
some
Iggy Pop.
cojones, huh?
Yeah. So this all came about because of a visionary producer named Tom Wilcox, and he was the impresario who put this whole wing-ding together. And this was 2 different tours that happened a couple years ago. And with Clem sadly passing last year of pancreatic cancer, if it does happen again, it'll happen in a different way. In fact, I just spoke to Paul Cook, the Sex Pistols drummer, the other day,
Wow.
and he was saying, well, now that Clem's on to his next gig and big gig in the sky, maybe we'll lust for life together, and I can take the drum stool and keep it going.
Amazing.
But this was, I'd said earlier when we were talking that touring with Pet Shop Boys was obviously the best job I was ever going to have. And then I felt that way about my first big TV presenting job on The Word. And now I can say I can't see how it's going to get better than singing, this amazing material. We performed Lust for Life in its entirety, and then we came back and sang and performed other Bowie, Iggy, Stooges numbers from the early to the mid 70s. And these were in small clubs across the UK and in Ireland. And it was one of those things that, for me, it was a homecoming, because I'd come over to Britain in the 80s to be a singer. And the interesting thing about doing that project was we were rehearsing, we knew we had the material down, but I knew the musicians were like, I don't know. I mean, how's Katie going to step into Iggy's shoes? And anyway, doubts were thrown out the window after that first gig, because for me, every night it was an exorcism in reverse. And it's not that I became Iggy, I became me. And I was embodied in this whirling dervish of joy. And it was kind of a revival tent meeting. And it wasn't because of me, because the audience were there because they love that material. They love Clem Burke. They love Glen Matlock. They want to hear Kevin on guitar, Kevin Armstrong, and his incredible mastery and creativity. But I think I was the wild card that satisfied that Iggy itch.
Good for you, because when I watched it, I wasn't sure what to expect, and I thought it might be, and I can't think. Don't take this. I can't think of a better example, but like a slightly camp reworking. Like, I'm not saying
theatrical.
Mike Flowers pops, but you know what I mean.
Right.
And it might have something a bit that element to it.
Yeah, stagey.
And instead, I mean, you just said it. You're like possessed on stage. I thought by a spirit of rock and punk.
I left myself. People. You asked earlier about like, was it intimidating to like put myself in a position like to get with these dance companies or audition for a TV show. The thing that was interesting about Lust for Life was walking onto that stage. It felt like I was at home plate, and I was at home. I felt like I belonged. That was the right place to be. I was doing what I was meant to do.
That's great. And that comes across. And have you had any feedback from the Igster himself?
So Kevin had sent him, I think, some clips maybe after a first tour, and Iggy eventually came back with like, oh yeah, I saw it was good. Just like the most neutral. Like, what is he going to say? Like, oh, I'm really scared for my,
that chick is me.
She's eating my lunch. Like it's a funny position for him to be in, and he's still very much alive and kicking.
Very much.
But that, I have to say that doing that material is this was what was interesting, was getting into his head, because Kevin has worked, Kevin Armstrong, the band leader, has worked with Iggy on and off since the 80s. And so he coached me, Kevin, and he said, when Iggy, hit this phrasing that he did, if you look at it this way, you can pick up on the cadence and his humor and his vulnerability. And so it was like a masterclass in understanding. Or Kevin was able to say, the thing about Iggy is that he was, as a teenager, he listened to Motown. He grew up in Michigan, and that was the local music. And, it was those girl groups that he was into. So I had an understanding. I went in thinking, am I going to be able to like match what was going on? And I realized, okay, this is a 28-year-old testosterone-filled, rocket fuel bag of spunk. Not me, him. But I'm coming in, with the rage of being a woman alive, for over 50 years. And I'm thinking, actually, there is a lot of girl testosterone. Is that a thing?
Yeah,
I guess it's called estrogen.
Good. Yeah.
That is absolutely valid. And the other thing about Iggy's lyrics is that there's so much, it's actually a lot of shame and vulnerability in there, where he's like begging for women's attention, or he's being really inappropriate because he's compulsive and can't help himself. So it was actually quite an interesting psychological exercise where I realized, hey, I have the confidence to do this. And also, Iggy wasn't that confident, but he was confident enough to stand up in front of thousands and go, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still doing it.
No, I mean, we talked about this before. Unfortunately, I'm getting messages flashing up on the screen going, go now. There's another crew coming in, but I've interviewed him myself, and exactly, just got this impression of a walking neurosis, but completely honest about that. And just even some crappy little interview I did just opened up his soul immediately. And it's, I am absolutely damaged and dangerous goods is what he basically was saying.
Yeah.
I found that fascinating.
Yeah.
But listen, Katie, I could talk to you all day about this. It's been really great.
It's been great.
I can't wait to see what you do next after Lust for Life, because, anything could happen next.
Anything could happen.
Yeah.
Anything could happen.
Watch this space, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. I loved it.
Great. Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.